Ladies and gentlemen across the world, welcome to the Immigrants Nation podcast. I am obviously your host, Martin, and today we have the pleasure of hosting the amazing Dr. Carolina Tropini, an esteemed researcher and professor at the University of British Columbia. She specializes in microbiota, I hope I pronounced that correctly, biology for health applications. Today she will share her insights into the intricate links between immigrants, their diets, and our health. Dr. Carolina, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
All right, so you do one of those things that I'm like, those guys are really smart and they understand things I would have no idea how they work out. But because of you and many like you, we live a very healthy modern life. So Dr. Tropini, according to your research, what is the relationship between immigration or immigrants and immigrant foods, cultural adoptions, and gut microbiome?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And actually, one of the things that we're finding out in the microbiota field is that as we change our foods, we're actually becoming less healthy in a way. So modernization has done a lot of good things in terms of expanding our duration of life and life expectancy, but it also has changed the way that we interact with our environment. And while we're not dying anymore of infectious diseases the same way that we were hundreds of years ago, we've actually changed our diet in a way that doesn't support a lot of our intestinal health in the same way. So we're now seeing diseases that our ancestors didn't have a name for. So a lot of the inflammatory diseases that people talk a lot about now, inflammatory bowel disease, multiple sclerosis, these are all diseases that are increasing in prevalence, and that a lot has to come from these changes in lifestyle. And one of the things that has been interesting is that as immigrants, depending where we're coming from, coming to North America particularly, we're actually coming into places and into lifestyles that sometimes can trigger these diseases. And so there's a bit of it's a double-edged sword, that there are things that are much better, but there are also things that we may have been doing better in the countries that we're from.
All right, excellent. So there's 50 million immigrants across the globe. The world has become such a global village. We're moving back and forth. With that, foods are also changing, like you indicated. So if I am an immigrant or I'm looking to migrate to a different location where obviously the foods are going to be different from what I used or grew up eating, how do I adopt to the new menus, new ways of eating, incorporate what I bring with, and still be able to support my health, my gut, and my results in life?
It's a really important and really difficult question. Our microbiota are a little bit like specific ecosystems that are very different in every one of us, and they are so unique to us, they become almost like a fingerprint. But at the same time, when you change your diet, what your microbiota can eat very much changes. And so while you have the same general membership of this ecosystem, if you can't feed everyone that's there, some of the members may go away. And so by going away, maybe they're not going to be able to produce compounds that are important for your health. And so in general, it ends up being very person specific, but in general, we think that eating a diet that has a lot of fiber is what helps maintain a diverse microbiota and support health better. This comes because the microbes that are in us do not usually get access to a lot of the nutrients that we get through our diet because we absorb them, but they get fed by the fiber that we're not able to break down, and so they break this stuff down and then create good metabolites, good chemical products that actually help reduce inflammation and help keep our gut happy.
Okay, so I truly understand what you're saying because I'm so fascinated by the gut and understanding how the gut affects the rest of the body. But let's break this down for someone who may start saying, okay, this is getting too complex and I'm not following, right? And while we're breaking down the purpose and the reason of how food affects our gut, could you also relate that to the gut and how the vagus nerve work together in a human body?
Yeah, so when we're eating food, we're actually connecting many parts of our body. The gut is connected to our brain. You're talking about the vagus nerve is connected to our nervous system. And when we're eating, we start a process of breaking things down, even just by chewing and mixing them up with bacteria and fungi and viruses that are present through our entire digestive tract. And so even when you start just by chewing some bread, you're starting an entire process which activates the peristalsis, which is the squeezing of the gut to actually move components down. And at the beginning, when the food is moving down your digestive tract, we're trying to make sure that we can get as many of the nutrients as we can as possible. So we're actually producing antibacterial compounds throughout the first part of the digestive tract. And we have, for example, the stomach has a very low pH, so very high acidity, which keeps the number of bacteria down. And in those parts, we're actually trying to eat up all of the sugars, the proteins, the fats, and all of those compounds that we're very, very good at breaking down ourselves. As you go down further in the digestive tract, now you start having a lot more bacteria. And we're talking about incredible numbers. We're talking about 10 trillion bacteria that are inside our gut. To give you a sense, that's about 100 times the number of stars in the Milky Way.
Yeah.
Really astronomical numbers. And these are all things that we just carry around with us, and they make vitamins that we don't know how to make. They make these anti-inflammatory compounds that we were talking about. And they also prevent infections from occurring. Because say that we talked about immigrating to North America, but there's also times when people may go on vacation somewhere else, and the locals don't get food poisoning, but the visitors do. And those are situations when our own microbiota is not as complex as we would like it to be, and it has opened up niches where these pathogens can actually get in and create inflammation. But the locals have more diverse microbiota. And so throughout this entire process of digestion, you're supporting this diversity by eating a lot of different types of fiber primarily, because then by the time that you're in the further away part of the intestine, now you really are feeding the microbiota with this fiber.
That's very interesting. A friend of mine says every time I go on vacation, I specialize on beer and bread because it fixes my gut. Now that makes a lot of sense to me, right?
Yeah.
So, based on your observation, have you found specific changes in the gut microbiota as people in general, and the diets that we're eating? What are the health implications that you're seeing as we're adopting new diets?
So in general, when we eat a diet that doesn't have that is more processed and doesn't have as much fiber, we tend to see a loss of diversity of our microbiota, and that really comes because we don't have the foods that can support its growth. When we lose diversity in the microbiota, that's when we think the microbiota becomes less resilient, for example, against pathogens that may be coming in. When we eat a new food that has a lot of fiber, unless we have the right types of microbes to break it down, this food may naturally not be broken down as much. And so that's one of the ways that, for example, it doesn't mean that for everyone eating more fiber is going to be beneficial, because if you don't have the right bacteria that will break these compounds down, then they'll just be passing through. And so when we change diet, we have a chance to modify the microbiota in different ways. And again, it's a little bit like this ecosystem, right? If all of a sudden you have your forest and you change the weather, different things will be able to grow. And this is exactly what happens also in our gut.
Based on your research, how do immigrant communities contribute to the dietary diversity of their new countries, and what impact does this have on the local microbiome?
Yeah, so immigrant communities bring an incredible amount of diversity, and that's one of the things that I think is really exciting and positive about globalization, is that there's a lot more sharing of cultural practices and different foods. And in general, with the microbiota, we like to think that also a more diverse diet helps to support more types of microbiota members. The studies that I've seen in terms of immigrants tend to relate more on the side of trying to see, as I was mentioning, these modern diseases, how they start because of sometimes when the cultural practices are not kept, and so that the diet maybe becomes less high fiber content because of moving into a country where then you'll have a lot more processed foods, and so they tend to be more on that side. But in general, diets that are more traditional, that will have higher numbers of different types of veggies or nuts or berries, those are ones that really support the growth of the microbiota.
Excellent. So we're about 10 minutes into our conversation. If somebody's joining in, they're kind of late on the introduction, give us a 30-second elevator pitch of what qualifies you to talk about microbiota.
Well, I am an assistant professor at the University of British Columbia, specializing on the microbiota and how it affects the gut, and thinking about it as an environment that lives within us.
Excellent. So let's get a little into what you're working on at the moment, right? In the past, in this very moment as we're speaking, is there a project that you've gotten into that is completely fascinated you, or has changed how you perceive certain things?
Yeah, so it's really hard to pick between projects, because one of the things that is really exciting about doing this type of science is that we're learning new things every day. And so one project that I've been thinking a lot about today is a collaboration that we have with Annie Siernia's lab. This is a lab that is fantastic here at UBC that works on the brain and behavior, and we have this collaboration to understand how early life inflammation affects brain development. And one of the things that we know that happens is that with these inflammatory diseases, we're actually seeing that they're being diagnosed more and more in children, and at a time that the microbiota is really critical for the development. And so with this collaboration, we're really interested in understanding how we can decrease the inflammation and help have a normal and healthy development in kids. And so here in the way that we do these type of studies, we're both looking at patient samples, but also looking at trying to model this type of really complex interactions that happen in doing this in the context of a laboratory setting, where we can really tease apart the different components and how to affect them. So that's one of the projects that we're really interested in pursuing, and that we think that is going to be really important as our communities evolve. It becomes really hard to try to have diets that are as enriched in fiber as maybe our ancestors had. With modernization, it's hard to think about a way to go back in time, and really maybe that shouldn't be the goal. But finding ways in which we can maybe use the technologies that we have to support our health better than we might have done is really important, and we think it's really exciting.
Talking about the use of technology, as immigrants are moving across the globe, something else is also moving across the globe. We're becoming a global village, and communication has become really fast and accessible to almost everybody in any part of the world. And so if we are adopting technologies, how should we use technologies, and especially as AI is starting to come to the front for us to look at how do we change our lifestyle behaviors and food?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I guess I'm not sure that I have the bulletproof answer, but I like to think about technology as something that can help us. I think that technology has a lot of darker sides and things that are that are potentially worrisome, like in the way that, for example, we see kids uptaking technology really early on and maybe affecting negatively their mental health. But there's also ways in which technologies can help us. And one of the ways in which I think technologies can help us is to combat a lot of the medical problems that we have. And so there, I think that something like artificial intelligence can really help us tease apart so much data and so many connections that we have. Ideally, we would like to be able to have a person that might be suffering from a disease. There's so many parts of this. We talked about the microbiota, but there's also genetic components to all of these diseases. There's the environment, there's their history, and putting together all these informations to try to find a cure for a person is very, very hard. And so technologies there can really be a way to try to support our search for some of these cures and some of these solutions. And so I think one of the things that I guess I would like to think about in terms of technology is a little bit. Do you watch Star Wars? Have you seen any of the Star Wars movies?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, so their technology is very much in service of larger goals. It's funny that when we're looking at the different characters in Star Wars, we're never really worried about the robots taking over because they're part of the system. They obviously have a lot more knowledge than maybe some of the human characters, but the humans interact with them in a way to make things better. And so I hope that's where technology can be going more than AI taking over the world.
I keep going. No, I'm sorry. I couldn't hold back. I'm sorry. I keep going.
No. That's the kind of just the general my general hope, at least.
I'm just gonna kind of lean in and kind of, because you touched on Star Wars, one of those movies that personally just translate me into a different person, and my imagination gets wild. But I also take a lot from that. And a while ago we interviewed Patrick, who's from France, and he's, oh gosh, I'm forgetting what his injection is, but he's introduced this injection that blows onto your skin and pushes medicine into your body, no pain or whatever, and it's really effective. So, and we talked about Star Wars in that context and how it inspired him to get that injection, right? The reason why I bring technology into our conversation is because we have a lot of apps or softwares that are on health, and some we've also integrated into our homes, and we're starting to depend on those, and our children are going to be really reliant on technology in everything that they do. As an immigrant parent, I am conscious where I want to have some privacy and I want to be able to do certain things myself, but at the same time I'm excited about technology and I want to utilize it without feeling violated, if you want to use that word, or feeling like my space is getting occupied by other forces, right? And so how do you balance the two and still benefit your children, yourself, the community?
It's something that I think about daily. I have two boys. They're 8 and 10, and we're getting to that age where they're starting to ask or see that their friends have the smartwatches and the cellular phones, and we haven't given them to them yet. But it feels like kind of a losing battle. And so right now, the technology, I would like them to learn how to type and do these things, but we're still keeping the technology at a bit of a distance because I want them to learn to be kids first. But I feel like these are kind of some of they're such personal decisions, right? And one of the things that worries me a little bit about technology is that I see this in myself, that when I try to go somewhere, I'll use Google Maps and I won't even worry about thinking about how I would get there. I just follow the maps and get there. And I can imagine that with artificial intelligence, that could become part of our lives in many other ways. And maybe knowing how to get somewhere it won't be that big of a problem. But with other things, I don't want my kids to rely on artificial intelligence to think about things instead of developing their own creativity and their own intellect. And those guardrails are not being put by regulators yet, because it's moving so fast that it's really hard to do that. And so it kind of leaves it up to the parents to decide where to set boundaries that are going to be right for one's family.
As a scientist, when you're within your peers, when you guys have a conversation about how technology is helping you be able to move faster in your research, are you ever stopping to look at how that is working the other way around in terms of, like, for example, in your home setup, you're concerned about what your children can adopt and should not adopt? Because
Yeah,
for me,
absolutely. Yeah. Sorry.
I feel like I'm a poor parent compared to what my parents were, because my mom and dad would say no to certain things, and I have a difficulty saying no, because when I say no to technology, I'm also thinking in the near future you are going to need to be very conversant with utilizing all these tools to be able to remain competitive in the marketplace. And so from a health perspective, how should parents who are in a dilemma like myself be raising our immigrant children?
Yeah, I guess maybe I can tell you what I think is right for my family, but I think that every family has their own traditions and their own needs. Like, everyone is going to be different, and I'm with kids, is I think about with two kids, there's not so many ways of knowing whether the way that we're bringing them up is going to be the right or the wrong way, because hopefully they're going to become happy adults and positive members of the society. But you can't base statistics on just two kids. So I don't know yet if the experiment will have worked. But I guess in general, to make sure that they're healthy, my view is that because as humans we have evolved in dirt, we have evolved outside. Those are things that our bodies know how to deal with very well. I think that being disconnected from other humans is something that does not make us happy. And so to me, that is one of the worries about being on a phone all the time for kids as they develop, is that you start missing those really important cues that are things that are just worked into our biology, that we need to be in communities. That is just what humans have been for hundreds of thousands of years, right?
Yes.
And so those cues to me are important, just because of the way that we work as animals, right? And so trying to make sure that they get to see that part of reality before moving on to the virtual part, to me, is something that is important, and is something that is, in general, we try to have in our family as part of our rules and traditions.
Fantastic. So, getting back to your work, could you elaborate on any research findings regarding the impact of a diverse traditional diet on the gut microbiome? How do these findings compare to benefits and challenges of immigrant diets against the Western diets?
Yeah, one of the things that we're finding more and more is that the traditional diets tend to be really rich in components that help keep at least our microbiota happy. And so we see this across, like, looking at Mediterranean diet, as much as diets coming from traditional populations really around the world, because those tended to be sourced from natural foods that are really again what we evolved with. And so this is true from communities that people have studied in Tanzania, as much as people have studied them in Peru. All of these communities, because we've developed with our foods and we've developed with our environments, we've just adapted to really be able to source the things that ended up being, at a basic level, very important for our gut health. The the challenge with the moving into industrialized countries that have a lot of processed foods is that then all of those components are not present anymore, and that has at least correlated with the negative impacts on some aspects of our health. But again, it really is this double-edged sword, because things like antibiotics are really, really important for our survival in the case of infections, but they also have negative effects on our microbiota. And so when we're talking about foods, some of the food improvements have been really important. For example, the reason why foods have been processed is so that they would have higher caloric content, and they would allow people to not to forage as much food. But at the same time, then you're missing important components. And so I feel like with everything, there needs to be the right balance. And so I think there are things that, from our technologies and, from moving to different places, like there are good things that can come from that. But there are also things that by moving away from traditions, we actually risk going off into a path that might be negative.
Okay. So from what you're saying, I'm feeling it's time for us to delve into supplements. So there's a great market out there that is grown over the last several years, actually a decade or so, and it's on supplements. And supplements have become such a big deal in our world today. Why are supplements important? How do we decide what to be on and what not to be on?
Yeah, I'm not a medical doctor nor a dietitian. So again, this is the thing that I'm saying are mostly coming from the research that we've done, and the things that we know from the field, as well as my own personal views and values.
Uh-huh.
The supplements are in some sense reductions of the whole food that you might want to be eating. And so when we think about vitamins or fiber supplements, the idea is very good to have these components, but normally the way that we would have digested them is through the consumption of the whole fruit or the whole vegetable. And some of the time, by just doing the supplement, you may be missing some other factors that would be present in the food that would actually increase the health benefits that would come from them. And so not all supplements are the same, and not all they're not most of the time supplements that come from extracts of food will not necessarily have a particularly positive or negative impact because they may be missing components. And so in terms of going for the supplements, what I do with my family is that if we can at all try to go from the whole food source to begin with, because that tends to have then the entire gamut of components that you're trying to get. The eating the whole orange is better than drinking the juice, right? Because when you drink the juice, you're missing all of the fiber, and some of the components will not be as protected as they will be otherwise. So that's more of the direction that we kind of think about them.
Oh, you should hang out with my son. He pulls out the orange bottle and shows me, Dad, look, it says orange.
Yes, my son did the same thing too.
I just find that really interesting. So, what challenges do immigrants face based on what you guys are looking at in sourcing ingredients for their traditional cuisines and in new countries? And how does this affect their gut health?
Yeah, one of the things that, as an immigrant is already hard enough to have to start a new life in a new place. And for immigrants that are coming into communities that might not have within the communities that are they're coming from their home countries, then it can be really, really hard to actually get the ingredients to start with. And the reality is that sometimes I really like cooking, and one of the things that I find is that, for example, even the milk tastes different. It doesn't taste necessarily better or worse. It just tastes different. And so when I make gelato, it just doesn't taste the same than when I would do this in Italy. And and this is for something like milk. If you're looking for components and for ingredients that are really special from a specific region, you may actually not even be able to import them, and so that kind of creates some challenges to begin with. And so it also depends, I think, where you move to. Cities that are more international might have different markets where they bring in different types of food and ease those things. But in terms of the research that we see is it's really this adaptation to different cultures very strongly reshapes the microbiota. And so moving to a different country means that if you're going to be changing your lifestyle, you're actually probably going to be moving also your microbiota to something that looks more like the microbiota of the country that you've moved into. And so here, most of the studies have been done at a level, for example, of comparing communities that are more rural versus communities that belong to more of cities that are more industrialized. And in those cases, the microbiota composition becomes completely different. It really changes, and it changes along this the spectrum of rural to industrialized. Because as we become more industrialized, even the water gets filtered, and so our exposure to different microbes becomes very different. Whether we get our hands dirty and pick the food from the ground versus if we take it from a supermarket shelf, that changes very much how we expose ourselves to microbes. And this has over a long term, and looking at human communities can have big impacts in the microbiota.
How is our environment affecting our bodies?
In so many different ways. I'm someone that I become very happy when I'm outside in the sun. In Canada, people are starting to give out passes for national parks to improve mental health. We're so closely tied to the environment that we live in from a microbial perspective, because we can become inoculated by all kinds of microbes. And the majority of microbes that are out there could care less about us. Their mode of life is actually being part of the soil, and so if they come in, they will just transit through or never make it out. But when we interact with people, we also exchange our microbiota. And so by having changed that through different cultures and different ways of being and connecting with others, we're also fundamentally changed the way that we exchange these things. And so the connection with our environment really goes from the large scale, thinking about how sunlight provides vitamin D, all the way to thinking about the little microbes that we may or may not be exposed to by living in facilities and in buildings that are very clean.
From the research papers I've been reading lately, it seems like almost everybody is deficient of vitamin D. And so if that is true, how do we integrate our life in a way that we can be able to not just get vitamin D from a supplement on the shelf, but from where it's supposed to be, from our side?
Right, yeah. Well, and the thing that's really challenging is that in some places getting it from outside is not really an option because there may be pollution. And so there's so many different facets. And so if you're trying to protect yourself from air that is not clean, and then you kind of have to weigh in the sunshine versus the polluted air. And so there's so many layers. And I think that's part of one of the challenges of modern life is that we're faced every day with so many options, and it's so non-obvious how you're going to choose things that I personally think that that's something that very much affects mental health. But with vitamin D supplements, there is research that does help restore the vitamin D levels, and so it ends up being like an important personal choice of how much you're outside, because when you're outside, of course, you're exposed more to UV light, and that can also have negative effects. And so there's so many layers that one kind of has to keep in mind.
Very interesting. Let's jump onto biophysics and microbiology. How does your cross-disciplinary approach, combining microbiology and bioengineering and biophysics, oh my God, I said all of them, provide new insights into the microbiota, and how can these insights be used to support immigrants' health?
Yeah, one of the things is that historically we've made these different disciplines, but the reality is the world doesn't have disciplines. The world is what it is. It has mechanical parts, it has biological parts. They're all into the same thing. Cells, we think about them as biologically living entities, but they also have their cell walls that keep them sturdy. And so these mechanical biophysical properties are important. When we think about even changing our diet, we're actually, in some sense, we're engineering a microbiota to be a different community. And so all of these things, as we study them, there's not really those strict disciplines that we've grown up to think about because we had biology class and math class. It's all together. The reality is it mixes all of these disciplines. And so one of the things that in our research we use a lot is that we kind of try to understand the problem, the medical issue, and then it doesn't really matter how the solution comes. The solution may come from techniques that come from biophysics, or they may come from bioengineering. But in practice, it's about solving the problem so that we can improve our health. It's not, whether this was something that was developed in chemistry or in biophysics doesn't really matter. And so that gives a lot more diversity of thought. It gives also a lot of more options to find new solutions.
So immigrants love to have a good time, and when Friday comes around, we say it's time for a little cocktail. So between the cocktail, the beer, a lot of meat, supposedly for those of us who consume meat, how are weekend habits affecting our microbiome? What is the role of
the guidance now around alcohol is unfortunately that there's no good amount of alcohol, which which is too bad. I like cocktails and I like red wine. So, but from the perspective of how things affect our microbiota, the reality is that everything that makes it through our intestinal tract has a chance to be broken down, consumed, or modified by the microbiota. And that also very much happens to alcohol, to meats, and to anything that we can consume. One of the things that I can tell you is that whenever you're finding differences in your intestinal health, those are times that are your microbiota is also changing at the same time. So, whether we can feel the individual microbes or not, we're so connected with our intestines through our microbiota that it's really an interconnected system.
Okay, so I'm not gonna beat you down on diets because I know that's not your forte, but is there a diet out there that makes sense for everybody? And when I say everybody, I mean, I'm considering, for example, in North America, we're somewhere at about 2/3 of our population is overweight. And so how do we start fighting as people, as immigrants? How do we start staying healthy?
Yeah, there was a really beautiful study that was done in Israel about how people were responding to diet, and specifically they looked at a very large number of participants. There were 800 participants that they studied, both from the perspective of their health status and BMI and history, as well as their microbiota. And what they did in this study was to give specific foods to them and look at how their blood sugar changed. And so most of the time, people's blood sugar will increase when you eat a cookie and might not increase if you're eating a veggie. But what they found in this study is that individuals may actually have very surprising responses. So there were individuals that would have a blood sugar spike when they ate a banana, but not a cookie, and vice versa. And so there's definitely a very personalized part of how our bodies respond to foods. And in this personalized aspect, sometimes it really needs to be with trial and error to try to find things that may be healthy for us. And where I see science moving to is to understand these different components much better, so that when you actually go to the doctor, you could get this full analysis done, including what your microbiota looks like, and your doctor will be able to tell you you should be eating more bananas and fewer cookies, or vice versa, right? And so this is also in the study what they used to try to integrate all this data together was in fact machine learning. And so this is, I think, the way of the future, that where we understand that every individual has had a different history, which has built their microbiota, has built their health in a specific direction. And so I think it really needs to be personalized. At a general level, if everyone ate probably less meat, ate more veggies, I think you would see the overall health of communities becoming better. But that also needs to be helped by policy. It needs to be helped by having accessible food that is not so expensive, because the problem is that eating healthy is just out of reach for a lot of people, and that is a fundamental problem. It's too easy to say everyone should be eating avocados or berries, but when avocados or berries are so expensive, that is not going to be a change that can actually impact societies at large.
Talking about diet, I was a fan, still I am a fan of the not keto, carnivore diet. And so I personally tried it for 90 days. And in those 90 days, besides the first 2 weeks, that really sucked, I felt... I ran a lot, I increased my speed, I was stronger, I was performing way better in everything. The only place I did not see a significant difference is in how I process thought and the speed at which I process thought. But everything else improved. Habitually, though, for me, it was not sustainable. Like, I love avocados, and sitting across the table and watching people avocados and I could not touch them was like, okay, this is torture, it's not fun anymore. So, but is there truth in zeroing down on one specific diet and just sticking with it because for certain individuals it probably works for them?
Yeah, again, it's so personal that there are going to be diets that work for some people and just do not work for others. The challenge, though, is knowing how a diet may impact you for the long time, or the long term. So one of the things that, for example, we've seen in the microbiota field research is that if you have bacteria that will convert some of the compounds in meat, you may actually be more likely to get something like atherosclerosis. And so this actually ends up being very dependent on the microbes that you have in your gut, because if you're eating lots of meat, there's this compound called carnitine that this bacteria can convert and cause plaques into your blood vessels. And so the individuality of every one of us means that something that might work for you will not work for me, and vice versa. So knowing all those details becomes important to really try to predict how certain things will work, and that's not even while considering taste and the people wanting to be vegetarian for environmental reasons or other things. And so the key part of trying to keep your diet balanced in the face of all of these things is quite difficult to really be able to achieve in a full way.
What are the most promising applications of your research that could be translated into practical solutions for improving the gut health of immigrants specifically? And what future research directions are you planning to explore that could further benefit immigrants' populations?
So one of the things that we're really excited about is trying to find some of these bacteria that have been vanishing as people have become more industrialized. Because as we were saying that there's all these changes in lifestyle, we're finding that there are bacteria that are present in rural populations that are now becoming extinct, gone from industrialized human populations. And so we're trying to understand which ones are important, which ones should be brought back to our societies, And I think that those, if we can keep them around and keep the good ones, we could have improvements in health for immigrants and just generally human populations.
So man is to water. What's the significance of fluidity in our body?
Well, we're made up of so much water. Drinking water keeps everything happy. Without water, we shrivel, right? And actually, that's true of our microbes as well. And so, we know that the bacteria in our gut, if they don't have enough water, they will actually not function as well. So I think that drinking a good amount of water is always a good idea.
So you were quick to point out you're not a general physician, but talk to immigrant children and their teeth.
Oh, what are you thinking about in terms of teeth?
Yes.
Toothbrushing?
So this is one thing that you hang out with a bunch of immigrants, and once in a while you hear mom say, and you need to go brush your teeth, but the kid goes to bed without brushing their teeth, right? So the idea of brushing your teeth is you have good health for your teeth, but why is that relevant?
Well, the way that maybe I've drank the Kool-Aid too much, but going back to the bacteria that we have in our mouth now, because we've changed our diets to diets that are richer in starch and richer in sugars, the problem really lies in that change in our lifestyle. Animals don't brush their teeth and they don't have tooth decay in the wild, but because we have diets that cause sugars to be stuck in our teeth, then bacteria can grow. As they're growing, they ferment these products, they acidify the environment, and they create holes in our teeth because of this acid. And so this is, again, a product of human modernization that then requires this changes. And I definitely chase down kids to brush their teeth every night.
Very interesting. Our listener, this has been fascinating. Oh my God, we could keep going, but we're getting to the top of the hour, Dr. Tropini. I'm having fun. So where should our listeners get a hold of you?
Well, you can find me if you just Google my name. You can find our lab website and resources, and my email is on there, and I'm always happy to chat.
What are you working on that is fun?
So many different things. Well, one of the things that we talked about are kind of this brain gut health connections. We're also very interested in using the bacteria in our gut to actually tell us when things are not going well inside our gut. Sometimes in medicine we have to wait until the symptoms become really strong. But the reality is that the bacteria in our gut are so little and they're so sensitive to changes that we're trying to find ways that they can actually tell us when things are changing before they get bad in a clinical way.
Very interesting. Your work plays a big role in how in the future and presently as human beings we can alter our diet so that we can become hopefully superhuman beings. But talking about superhuman beings, there's also super diseases that have really just gotten a hold of us human beings. And so, for example, what's the role of the gut when it comes to, and I know there is a variety of cancers out there, but how does the gut and certain diseases like cancer play together?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question, and it's a big area of research in the microbiota field. Not only do microbes modify cancer drugs, but depending on where your cancer is, the microbiota can actually change, and that there's groups that are trying to find ways to measure the microbiota and how it's changing, to measure actually if there's cancers that are going on. So an example is Rob Knight's group that has been publishing work looking at how the microbes that are present for people that have different types of cancers actually may be changing. And so there's a lot of work in that direction to try to understand whether this could be a potential diagnostic. But because it's all connected, the microbes that live in us break down the compounds that we take by mouth, but they also break down compounds that are in our blood, because there's a direct connection between compounds that are in our gut that can transfer to our blood system and vice versa. In practice, it's all really, really interconnected. And so even things that even when we exercise, our bacteria now all of a sudden have more access to lactic acid from our muscles. It all goes through the blood system one way or the other, and also connects with the gut. So also in the cases of cancers, it can really all play together.
Is exercise as important as everybody is talking about it?
Again, not a doctor, or not that kind of doctor, but yes, exercise is really critical. And there's a lot of data that shows that not only does it make people live longer, it also makes us live better. Again, and I think that it's also due to the fact that we evolved moving a lot. It feeds into not only our feelings of self-worth, but also our feeling of self-image, and it's just a really positive way of keeping your body younger and healthier.
Tropini, before we get off and I go enjoy that cocktail, what is the one thing you are hoping I would ask you that I have not asked you?
I think we actually covered quite a bit of ground in our conversation today. I thought the questions were very good.
All right, cool. Thank you so much for coming to the Immigrants Nation. Thank you for speaking to us. I am so thrilled. I learned quite a bit from you today. I hope we can get to do this again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for hosting me and for all the good questions.
All right, good luck in everything you do. If things change and there's something out there that we need to help you push out, please feel free to reach out. We're here for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Dr. Tropini, we appreciate you. Thank you, and God bless you. Bye-bye.